Hello and a very warm welcome, viewers. You're watching the brand new edition of To The Point with your host, Kriti Mishra. India has placed an advance order to block 300 million doses of a new COVID-19 vaccine, Corbevax, from Hyderabad-based company Biological E. Corbevax is a recombinant protein subunit vaccine, which means it is made up of a specific part of SARS-CoV-2, the spike protein on the virus's surface. Biological E's Made in India vaccine is expected to be the game changer in our fight against the pandemic. And joining us today on the show is Managing Director of Biological E, Ms. Mahima Datla. Ma'am, welcome to Sunset TV and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Ma'am, first and foremost, what is a recombinant protein subunit vaccine? How is this very effective against SARS-CoV-2?
So just to try and maybe oversimplify this, the proteins exist on the surface of a virus. That's why it's called a subunit of the virus. And in this particular case, we all know by now it's the spike protein that exists on top of the virus, on the surface of the virus. So what we traditionally do is we take the protein and we express it. In this case, we express it in recombinant yeast technology. It's it's a benign yeast. It's highly safe and proven. And once we express the protein, we introduce it into the body so that your immune system recognizes it and mounts an effective immune response against the protein. There have been several vaccines that are extremely successful using this approach. Hepatitis B is a classic example. In fact, Hep B vaccines are given to children at birth. That's how safe they are. They're amongst the safest category of vaccines. HPV vaccines, human papillomavirus vaccines, are also on a similar technology. And just to go a little into history, but the scientists who discovered this technology actually won the Nobel Prize in chemistry way back in 1980. So the technology per se has been tried and tested for vaccines for several decades now. So how have we applied this in the context of coronavirus? Is that, like I said, the spike protein is on the surface. That's what gives it the name corona, because it looks like the sun. And a part of the spike protein is called RBD. So it's called the receptor binding domain of the spike protein. And we know now that the receptor binding domain is instrumental in the virus attaching itself to the ACE2 receptors, which exist in human cells. So to put it simply again, and I've used this analogy before, it's like a lock and key mechanism. The lock being the ACE2 receptors and the key being the RBD portion of the spike protein, because that's the way it enters our cells, it attaches itself to them. So our vaccine is really to develop the protein of the receptor binding domain. We combine this with adjuvants so that it gives a much more effective immune response. And then this is presented to your body. So again, your body can generate enough specific antibodies against the receptor binding domain with the idea that it will prevent any attachment into your cells and prevent you from getting infected. So that's really, in a nutshell, what our vaccine is about.
All right, ma'am. So what are the difference between Corbevax and other COVID-19 vaccines that you have in the market right now? Or as you know that India is set to expand the vaccine basket?
Right. Sure. So there's, again, to just keep things simple, I will classify these vaccines into 4 different categories. There are a few others, but maybe in the context of COVID, again, the 4 that I want to speak about are probably the most relevant ones. I'll start with mRNA vaccines. So in the case of mRNA vaccines, there's no protein that gets introduced into the body, but it's really genetic instructions to your cells. And then your cells will synthesize the protein and again present itself to your immune. So these are just different mechanisms, but the principle is to present a protein or a virus so that your own immune system can kick in and mount an effective response. Examples of mRNA vaccines, as you know, are Pfizer and Moderna. The second category of vaccines is what I call vector-based vaccines. So in this case, again, the principle is the same. You take a protein, but in this case, you take a benign virus, something that's safe, and use that as a carrier for the protein to get presented to your immune cells. So there's vaccines, and we've seen adenovirus being used as the vector or the carrier for these proteins. And adenovirus is a virus that's considered safe to humans. It's benign. In fact, most of us carry it. It causes common colds and so on. So that's the vector that a lot of companies are using to deliver the protein to your immune cells. So examples of this are, of course, Johnson & Johnson, Sputnik, and AstraZeneca. So they all use the adenovirus platform to deliver the protein. So this would be, I would say, the second category of vaccines. The third category that you're seeing are inactivated vaccines. Covaxin from Bharat Biotech falls into this category. And in this case, what you're doing is you're taking the whole virus and you're growing it in a very controlled environment. You can imagine, because it's a whole virus, so you need, a BSL-3 contained facility. And then what you do is you weaken or kill the virus. That's why it's called a killed vaccine sometimes, or an inactivated, because you're trying to weaken the virus, usually through chemical means or heat or a combination of the two. And then again, you present the virus to the human body, so your immune system, kicks in. So it's a fine balance, because you want to make sure the virus structure stays intact, but it's weak enough such that it doesn't cause any safety concerns to you. So this class of vaccines are called inactivated vaccines, and very good examples of inactivated vaccines are injectable polio vaccine, Japanese encephalitis, which is the injectable kind, is also a killed vaccine or an inactivated. So again, we have examples of this technology being deployed in other areas extremely successfully. And the last one, of course, is the recombinant subunit vaccine, which I spoke about, which is what Corbevax is.
All right, thank you so much for making things so lucid for our viewers. But ma'am, 1,500 crore investment in Corbevax vaccine marks government's first at-risk investment for mass immunization. How does it feel to get the first upfront payment?
To be completely honest with you, it feels like a huge responsibility. We've been extremely fortunate that even in the early stages of development of this vaccine, we were funded by BIRAC from the Department of Biotechnology, in addition to being funded by the Gates Foundation and CEPI, which is the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Initiative. So, during the early stages, this funding was deployed to make the clones, to adapt it to yeast, to pichia, to down select the clones, because you need to make sure they're scalable, they're stable when you scale, all of those things. So we were extremely fortunate to already receive early stage support from the government. Subsequently, we were again very fortunate that we had our commercial banking partners, International Finance Corporation and Exim Bank, the Export-Import Bank of India, who have historically been partners to the company, but have been extremely supportive in us trying to create or use that to expand infrastructure, because then you need physical infrastructure, and that's where they stepped in. In fact, the Development Finance Corporation, as part of the Quad Alliance, is also stepping in so that we can create what we call the hardware, the physical infrastructure, right? But this 1,500 crores upfront from the government was extremely detrimental to our ability to be able to offer large quantities immediately. And I'll tell you why. This is going directly to secure supplies of critical raw materials and consumables that take anywhere between 4 and 6 months to get delivered. In normal course, we would have waited until we got a license. So we finish clinical trials and we get a license, and then we would place orders for this, but that would mean that it would be 4 to 6 months after receiving a license that we are actually able to make and deliver a product. So this upfront payment is going directly to secure the key raw materials and consumables that we need, such that we minimize the time or effectively have no time between license and availability of the product. So this is true at-risk manufacturing, and it's incredible for the government to come forward and do this, because without their support, we would have had a product, but we wouldn't have been able to make it, at the run rate that I'm going to talk about in a bit. It wouldn't have happened without this support.
Absolutely, ma'am. One would agree, because that kind of order, that kind of upfront payment, that I'm sure must have been extremely instrumental. But there's another important aspect that people are talking about your vaccine, which is that it is going to be extremely affordable. Of course, I know that you can't talk about prices right now, but what are the indications?
Thank you for your understanding, first of all, on the pricing matter. I think that as we get closer to licensure, we will, of course, in collaboration with the government, announce the pricing. But I just want to give you an example of the fact that we want to make vaccines affordable is not new, or it's not just for COVID vaccines. And, for example, when we introduced Hib vaccine as part of pentavalent, the price of immunizing a child, so you need 3 doses for full immunization. So the price of immunizing a child was close to $10. And once we introduced Hib and pentavalent, that's come down to a little under or close to $2 for 3 doses. This has saved international organizations like Gavi and UNICEF, and of course our own government, close to $500 million just in the last 4-5 years, right? And we're a small company. This is a huge contribution from our end. In a humble way, I don't mean to, beat our own drum, but I'm just giving a live example of what we've done in the past that was so important for public health. And as a result, there's no country that remains on earth that hasn't introduced Hib vaccine into their routine programs. So it gives us immense pride that our company could contribute in its own small way to global health. Coming to COVID, there's 2 things. I think the technology that we chose, that's working, which is a very important factor, goes a long way in order to scale the vaccine. Now, the fixed costs in the vaccine business are substantial. They are detrimental to the COGS of a vaccine or cost of goods of a vaccine. So if you're able to make a really high volume, you can take advantage of economies of scale and be able to make a really affordable product. So in that sense, the technology lends itself well to being an affordable vaccine. And more importantly, every benefit that we've received, either through grants of BIRAC or through development aid from other organizations, is going to be passed on to the end consumer. So these 2 factors together will make this one of the most affordable vaccines out there.
All right, ma'am, we are keeping our fingers crossed for that. But ma'am, what are the kind of timelines that you're looking at, that the company is looking at?
So right now we are targeting September. That's why we made a commitment that between September and December, we will deliver 300 million doses. So right now we seem to be on track for that timeline.
All right. And as you said that the technology is scalable, but how have you integrated the entire supply and production chains? Because this target is massive.
Yes, it is. And, I don't mean to trivialize it when I say we can do it, because I know how hard it is to deliver this, but it's a challenge that we all accept gracefully, but, also humbly. We do have to say that we have a lot of experience making vaccines in large scale. For instance, tetanus toxoid, we make close to 2 billion doses of bulk antigen per year. So it's not trivial, but it's certainly doable. And in our case, we've already demonstrated large-scale production of the bulk antigen, so we know that we can do this. We, as a company, we usually let our actions speak for themselves. We try to under project and over deliver, if anything, because we're constantly trying to be conservative in people's expectations and in not letting them down. But when I say this, that's why I say it with great confidence, because we've been able to scale. Now, the second part of it, with respect to fill finish capacities, obviously, we don't want to trade off, capacities for routine vaccines, because even with COVID, children are continuing to be being born, and we have responsibilities and commitments to routine vaccines, for DPT, the triple vaccine, for measles, for rubella, for pentavalent, and for Japanese encephalitis. So while trying to make sure all of those commitments are being met and still scaling for COVID vaccines, of course, is a challenge. But luckily, with the support of DFC and our own banks, IFC and Exim, we've been able to invest in huge fill finish capacities such that we don't have to make those trade-offs. So this is internal stuff. This is stuff we can control, or stuff that money will solve. There are other things money won't solve, because every supplier needs to be able to scale, while manufacturers have to make 5 to 10 times more than they ever made. Each consumable and raw material supplier has to do the same. So we've been working extremely closely with them, and they've been very collaborative, and I have to say extremely transparent, which is important, because people, have been saying, no, this is not doable, or this is what I need to get it done. So these discussions have been going on for almost a year now. So we feel like we're in a very good position. Obviously, securing some of the key consumables and adjuvants was still underway. And that's where this investment by the government, or the upfront payment, is going to strengthen our hands to make sure we get that piece of the puzzle sorted as well.
Absolutely, ma'am. But one of the concerns that all of us are talking about, especially experts are talking about, is the mutation in the virus, the variations that we have. We don't know how the virus is going to behave. Now, there was Delta, there's Delta Plus. There are questions on the efficacy of vaccine. How much does that worry you?
To be honest, again, I don't mean to trivialize it, but I think, personally, I feel that the urgency should be around immunizing as many people as possible than worrying about whether it's the best vaccine against a particular variant, because we're never going to be able to catch up to that game, simply because the nature of the virus is it is going to mutate. And as long as you have unimmunized people, the more chances it will have to mutate, right? So I think, if on balance, if you say what's more worrisome, the variants or not having immunized people, I think it's unimmunized people are the bigger concern than, whether a vaccine covers all the variants. I don't think it's feasible. Different vaccines are behaving differently against the different variants. There seems to be some form of cross protection. And again, it varies vaccine to vaccine, and I won't get into the technical details here. But my personal perspective is we have to have an urgency around immunizing as many people as possible in a short window. And this is true for the whole world, which is why it's so challenging, and why supply of vaccines are so detrimental. Yes, different vaccines have different efficacy levels, but I wouldn't worry too much about it, because what you have to look at is all vaccines have played a crucial role in preventing severe disease and preventing hospitalization. So, on balance, I think that's what we should focus on.
That's the most strong argument I've ever heard on this, ma'am. The point is very well taken. But also the fact that India's landscape has changed drastically in terms of the permissions, in terms of ease of doing business, the way we have developed indigenous vaccines. What is your take? How has been government support through this?
Tremendous. I mean, it's really phenomenal. And for me, I mean, I've been in the business for 20 odd years, so I've had the opportunity of seeing this evolve, seeing regulatory systems evolve, seeing policy evolve. And I think it's remarkable. It's almost like a miracle that to see the response times of all the stakeholders. And it's not just the regulators, it's the scientists or the labs that are supporting testing, their turnaround times, the pragmatism that people are showing in contracts, whether it's company to company, doing deals with multinationals in the shortest window of time. So the spirit of partnership, and I hope this continues. I hope this is a lesson well learned. And of course, it's exposed our weaknesses. It's exposed areas that we need for strengthening, but this is a perfect opportunity to remember that as a lesson. And the fact that India has 3 now licensed vaccines, one of them indigenously developed, and that too in this window of time is a phenomenal achievement. And it's not just on the companies, it's all of the stakeholders without whom, this wouldn't have happened. And you yourself said this is unprecedented for the government to step in and support at-risk manufacturing, but that was what was needed, and the government understood that. So, I hope this is all, that we keep this feeling and we remember how we came together to make change happen.
Absolutely. So, ma'am, help us understand what are the plans for the company ahead? Everybody is talking about biological E and its vaccines.
Well, the plans is to really to blinkers on, be extremely focused. The immediate term plans, of course, is to make sure that we successfully tech transfer the J&J vaccine and start producing that for them as well. As obviously making sure that Corbevax scales and we're in a position to deliver according to our government's needs and according to COVAX facility or global needs, in fact. So I think that would really be the near-term focus. While doing this, I have to say, initially it was a challenge to keep our regular pipeline on track. We have a pneumococcal conjugate vaccine in phase 3 studies. We have an injectable polio vaccine that's going through clinical development as well, in the hopes that we combine it with pentavalent to make a hexavalent. And those programs did take a setback, especially initially during COVID. So just trying to get those back online as well, because like I said, those diseases continue and children succumb to them despite COVID. So we want to make sure that we bring those programs back on track and continue. Our focus will remain on vaccines, but of course, there's only so many infectious diseases you can go after. There's not like that many. But I do have to say we have made quite, a few strategic investments, and one of them, probably the biggest one, is on the mRNA technology platform. This has again been not because of COVID. We've made these investments for a different disease 4 or 5 years ago, because we recognize that that platform can transform the way, not just in which vaccines get discovered and delivered, but other immunotherapies as well. So that's an area we'll be focusing on. We speak a lot about the vaccine side of our business, but actually we have a specialty injectable side of the business. We have 4 products that are licensed in the US, and we have US FDA approved facilities. That's a nascent business. It started it started a while ago, but it started to become commercial about 2 years ago. So the idea would be to expand that as well. So to give you a breakup, that business contributes to about 20% of our revenues in vaccines, 80%. So COVID aside, because that will skew everything, but the idea is in the next 5 years, these businesses become equal contributors, so 50-50. So I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. And lastly, Ms. Datla, we've seen since the outbreak of the pandemic, women have led the charge, right, from DBT, Health Ministry, NIV. And now, since everybody is talking about the vaccines and biological E, there are high bets on that. You are leading the charge there. Tell us about your personal journey so far.
It's been a bit of a roller coaster ride, I must say, but over the months, I've learned to temper my sentiments, both with relation to successes as well as with disappointments, because they can be quite extreme. You know, at the start of this, we thought it'll be a sprint, but turns out it's a marathon. So one really needs to be able to find a middle ground and not really be swayed, like I said, by successes or disappointments, because they almost happen on a daily basis over something or the other, right? So it's been a real journey of expecting the unexpected and learning to embrace that there's going to be a lot of unpredictable things. There's going to be a lot of things outside our control. So just to be able to focus on the things that you can control and take it a little bit at a time. But again, personally, and I've always felt this, but I feel it much more acutely during this time. And it's an overwhelming feeling of gratitude, you know, gratitude for the team that we have in this company, gratitude for my health and my family's health and happiness, the fact that we're all together and healthy. And above everything else, gratitude for the opportunity to contribute at a time like this. I don't know how many people will be able to say this in their lifetimes, you know, that our company or our actions contributed in some humble way to serve humanity. And we've always felt that strong sense of purpose because we feel this with childhood immunization. You know, we directly impact lives of children and make sure that they're healthy and they have great opportunities in life. But COVID really made that much more extreme. So it's an overwhelming, really, feeling of gratitude. And yeah, I'm personally very motivated, and I can tell you our team is extremely motivated because of that. So every time we have bad days, we remind ourselves there's the bigger purpose, and it doesn't take much. You just have to look around you to remind yourself. So it's, yeah, gratitude.
All right, on that optimistic note, Ms. Datla, you've joined us. You gave us all those important details. And of course, it's a huge task cut out. It's an uphill task, but all the very best for your endeavors. You have this massive task at hand of this great immunization, this massive immunization program that India is conducting. All the very best, ma'am.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you for having me. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you, ma'am.